There are things you can prepare for in life. I prepared for retirement. I prepared for the moment my doctor told me my cholesterol was too high. I even prepared, in some dark corner of my mind, for the day I might lose my wife. What I never once prepared for was standing in a hospital corridor at 7 in the morning, still wearing the same clothes I'd had on the night before, when a stranger walked up to me and said, "Are you Leonard's father?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked at him. He was young, maybe 35, in a charcoal suit that was too nice for that hour, and he was holding a leather portfolio against his chest like a shield. "I'm sorry to approach you here," he said. "I'm Stuart Hale. I'm an attorney. I represent your son." My son. Not my son, the way you'd say it with warmth. He said it the way you'd say the defendant. That was the moment I understood that something had already happened, something I hadn't caught, hadn't seen coming, and that whatever it was, I was standing at the very end of it. Let me take you back 48 hours. That's where it really starts. My wife's name was Beverly. We were married for 38 years. She grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee, the youngest of 4 children, and she had a way of filling a room that I still can't explain to anyone who didn't know her. Not loud, not dramatic. She just made you feel like you were exactly where you were supposed to be. She was 61 years old when she died of a cerebral hemorrhage. No warning, no slow decline, no chance to say the things you always mean to say. She was there on a Tuesday. She was gone by Thursday morning. The funeral was on a Saturday in early March. Cold. Gray sky the color of old concrete. About 70 people came, which surprised me. Beverly always said she didn't have that many friends, but that was just her being modest. The church was nearly full. My son, Philip, sat beside me in the front pew. He's 41. He works in real estate, commercial properties, mostly in the Nashville area, and he'd driven up the night before with his wife, Joanna. They sat together, and Joanna cried, and Philip kept his jaw tight, the way he always does when he doesn't want anyone to see what he's feeling. I remember thinking that at least he had that much decency. My daughter, Claire, flew in from Portland. She's younger, 37, and she held my hand through the entire service without saying a word. That's Claire. She doesn't say things. She just stays. After the reception, after the last neighbors had hugged me and told me Beverly was in a better place, after the church ladies had cleared away the trays of food, I went home alone. Claire wanted to stay with me that night. I told her I was fine. I wasn't fine, but I needed the house to be quiet, and I needed to sit in Beverly's chair by the window, and I needed to do that by myself. I was in that chair at around 10 o'clock that night when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. Normally, I wouldn't answer. But something made me pick up. "Is this Mr. Whitmore, Leonard Whitmore?" "It is," I said. "My name is Stuart Hale. I'm an estate and probate attorney based here in Franklin. I'm deeply sorry for your loss, sir. I know this is a terrible time to call, and I apologize for the hour. But I need to speak with you about something that can't wait. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning?" "What is this about?" There was a pause. "It's about your son, Mr. Whitmore, and your retirement accounts." I'd rather not say more on the phone. I sat there in the dark for a long time after I hung up. The house made its small sounds. The refrigerator hummed. The creak of the floorboard in the hallway, the one that's been loose for 11 years, and I never fixed. Beverly used to step over it without looking. Muscle memory. I thought about calling Philip. I picked up the phone twice. Both times I put it back down. The attorney had not told me not to call my son. He hadn't said anything like that. But something in his voice, that careful, practiced calm, had told me not to. So I didn't. Stuart Hale's office was in a small brick building off Main Street in Franklin, Tennessee. I'd driven past it 100 times and never noticed it. I got there at 8:30 the next morning. His assistant brought me coffee without asking. The good kind, not the burnt stuff from a communal pot. I remember thinking that was a good sign. It wasn't. Stuart came in at 8:45. He shook my hand with both of his, looked me in the eye, and said he was sorry about Beverly before he sat down. Then he opened his portfolio and slid a document across the desk. "Mr. Whitmore, are you familiar with a power of attorney that your wife signed approximately 8 months ago?" I felt the floor tilt under me, just slightly. Beverly signed a power of attorney? She did. The document was prepared by another firm. I only became aware of it 3 weeks ago through a separate matter. He paused. "The power of attorney granted your son Philip the legal authority to act on your wife's behalf in financial matters." I stared at the document. Beverly's signature was at the bottom. I knew her handwriting like I knew my own name. That was her signature. No question. "Why would she sign that?" I said, mostly to myself. "That's what I've been trying to understand," Stuart said, "because in the weeks following that signing, 4 separate transfers were made from a joint investment account held in your wife's name, one that you may not have been actively monitoring." "How much?" He told me the number. "I won't write it here. It's enough to say that it was the kind of number that changes the shape of a room." I set my coffee down very carefully. My son did this. The transfers were authorized under the power of attorney. They went to a business account registered to a company your son controls. He slid another page across. "There's more, Mr. Whitmore. I'm sorry. The second document was a letter, handwritten, addressed to me. I recognized Beverly's handwriting before I even read the salutation. I won't read the whole letter to you. Some of it was private, the kind of private that belongs between a husband and a wife and nobody else. But here is what she told me. Beverly had discovered the transfers herself about 6 weeks after they happened. She'd been reviewing statements. Beverly always reviewed statements, always, even when I didn't, and she'd noticed the withdrawals. She'd confronted Philip. He'd told her it was temporary, a short-term loan. He'd had a deal fall through and he needed liquidity, and he'd assumed she wouldn't mind, because it was family. He'd used that word, family. Beverly hadn't told me. She'd written in the letter that she was afraid I'd go straight at Philip. Her word was straight, and I knew exactly what she meant, and that it would break something between us that couldn't be fixed. She wanted to handle it herself. She wanted him to pay it back quietly, and then we would all move forward, and I would never have to know. But Philip hadn't paid it back. He'd stalled. And then Beverly's health had started to decline. Small things at first, things she'd attributed to stress. And then in January she'd been diagnosed with a small aneurysm. And then in February it had ruptured, and then she was gone. And she'd given the letter to Stuart Hale. She'd gone to him in December, 2 months before she died, and asked him to hold it, because she wanted someone outside the family to have it. Just in case, she told him. Just in case. She'd known something might happen to her. She hadn't said it in those words, but she'd known. I sat in Stuart Hale's office with that letter in my hands, and I didn't say anything for a long time. Outside, a delivery truck was backing up, and there was that beeping sound it makes. I focused on that for a while. What are my options? I finally said. You have several, Stuart said, and I'd recommend you not make any decisions today. Tell me anyway. He told me. I didn't call Claire that morning. I called her that afternoon, after I'd driven home and sat in the kitchen for 2 hours and made myself eat a sandwich I didn't taste. She answered on the first ring, the way Claire always does. I told her everything. She was quiet for a long time on her end of the line. Then she said, "Dad, I need to tell you something." And she told me. 3 months before Beverly died, before any of us knew about the aneurysm, before things had gotten bad, Claire had been visiting for Thanksgiving. Philip and Joanna had been there too, and on the last night, after dinner, while I was doing dishes, she had overheard a conversation between Philip and Joanna in the guest room. She hadn't been able to make out all of it, but she'd heard the words, "the account." And she'd heard Joanna say, "Your mother isn't going to live forever." And she'd heard Philip say, "By the time he figures it out, it won't matter." Claire had told herself she'd misunderstood. She'd told herself it was just Philip, being careless with words, the way he always was. She'd told herself it was nothing. She'd been telling herself that for 3 months. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked her. "Because I wasn't sure," she said. "Because I didn't want to be the one who blew up our family on a guess." Her voice broke a little. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry." "It's all right," I said. And I meant it, not because it was all right, but because Claire had been trying to protect the same thing Beverly had been trying to protect. We'd all been trying to hold something together. Philip had known that. He'd used it. That night I called Stuart Hale and told him I was ready to move forward. The next morning was when Philip showed up. He called first, said he was in town, said he'd been thinking about me, said he wanted to stop by and check on me. I told him that was fine. "Come over around 9, I said. "I'll make coffee." He looked tired when he came in. Joanna wasn't with him. He sat at the kitchen table and wrapped both hands around the mug I gave him and said, "How are you holding up, Dad?" I said I was managing. We talked for a few minutes about nothing. The weather. The people who'd come to the funeral. Whether I was eating enough. Normal things. Philip can do normal things. Philip can do normal things. He's always been good at that. Then he said, "I know this is hard timing, but I've been meaning to talk to you about some financial housekeeping. Now that Mum's gone, there are some accounts that will need to be retitled, and I want to make sure you're taken care of. I have a guy at the bank who can help us sort through everything." I looked at my son across the kitchen table, the table Beverly and I had eaten at for 22 years, the table where we'd helped him with homework, where we'd sat on the night he'd told us he was getting married, and Beverly had cried happy tears, and I'd shaken his hand. "What accounts?" I said. Something moved behind his eyes, just briefly. A small recalculation. "Just the joint stuff," he said. "The investment accounts, the ones you already transferred money out of." The kitchen got very quiet. Philip set his mug down. He didn't spill it. He was careful about that. He looked at me and I looked at him, and neither of us said anything for what felt like a very long time. "Mom told you," he finally said. "It wasn't a question." "Your mother left me a letter," I said, "with her attorney." He let out a breath through his nose. Slow, controlled. "Dad, I can explain." "You don't have to," I said. "I've already spoken to an attorney of my own." Something shifted in his face then. The careful composure cracked just slightly at the edges. "What does that mean?" "It means the transfers have been documented. It means the power of attorney your mother signed has been reviewed. It means Stuart Hale has filed the appropriate paperwork." I paused. "And it means you should probably call a lawyer." Philip stood up. He knocked the mug with his elbow. Not much, just enough to slosh coffee on the table. He didn't wipe it up. "You're serious right now? This is your wife's funeral weekend, and you're doing this right now." "Your mother is the one who set this in motion," I said. "I'm just following through for her." He said several things after that. Some of them I won't repeat. Some of them were the kind of things that, once a son says them to his father, cannot be unsaid. He told me I was making a mistake. He told me I didn't understand the whole story. He told me the money was going to come back, that he just needed time, that I was going to regret this. I walked him to the door. He stood on the front step in the cold March air and looked at me one more time, and I think he expected to see something in my face. Hesitation, maybe, or grief, or the kind of softness that a father has when his child is in trouble, no matter what that child has done. But I had made a decision, and Beverly had made one 2 months before she died. And the decision was this: that love does not mean allowing someone to take from you what they have no right to take. It does not mean staying silent while the person who was supposed to care for you treats your life's work as a resource to be managed. I closed the door. The civil proceedings took 7 months. There's no drama in that part. Or rather, the drama of it is the slow kind, the kind made of paperwork and phone calls and waiting. Stuart Hale was methodical. The financial forensics firm he brought in was thorough. Philip hired his own attorney, who initially took an aggressive posture and then, about 2 months in, seemed to advise his client toward a quieter approach. In October, Philip and Joanna signed a settlement agreement. The full amount was returned, every dollar, with interest, plus legal fees. There was no criminal prosecution. Stuart had counseled me that the civil route was cleaner, given Beverly's signature on the power of attorney. I agreed with him that there were nights when I wasn't sure I'd made the right call. Claire had moved back to Franken by then. Not permanently, she said, but she'd taken a remote position and she was renting a place about 15 minutes from my house. She came for dinner twice a week. On Tuesdays, she brought groceries and cooked. On Sundays, I cooked and we watched whatever game was on, and sometimes we didn't talk much at all, and that was fine too. A few weeks after the settlement, I had my own attorney draw up a new estate plan. It was comprehensive, it was airtight, and tucked into the final documents was a provision that Beverly herself had described in her letter. A specific bequest to Philip in the event of my death of exactly $1. Not nothing. $1. Beverly had explained her reasoning in the letter, in that dry, quiet way she had when she wanted you to understand something without her having to spell it out. She'd said, "You can't cut someone out entirely. They'll contest it, but $1 says everything you need to say and leaves nothing to argue over." She'd known. She'd thought it all through, lying there in December with an aneurysm she hadn't yet told me about, and she'd thought it through clearly, and she'd written it down, and she'd given it to a lawyer to hold. I don't know if I'll ever be done being angry about what Philip did. I don't know if I'll ever be done grieving Beverly, for that matter. Not just the losing of her, but the learning of what her last months had been like, what she'd been carrying. I think about that more than almost anything. But I think about something else too, on the better days. I think about a woman who knew she was running out of time, who saw clearly what was happening and what was going to happen, and who didn't panic and didn't fall apart. She made a plan. She sat down with a young attorney in a brick office off Main Street, and she said, "I need someone outside the family to hold this, just in case." And she walked out of there and went home and made dinner and didn't say a word. That's who Beverly was. That was the kind of woman I spent 38 years with. I still step over the loose floorboard in the hallway. I still haven't fixed it. I don't plan to. I still haven't fixed that floorboard. I tell myself it's because I've been busy. The settlement, the new estate documents, getting the gutters cleaned before winter. But that's not why. I leave it loose because stepping over it is the last habit Beverly left me with, and I'm not ready to let that go. Some things you hold on to, not because they're useful, but because letting go of them feels like a second loss, and one is already more than enough. I've had a lot of time to think about how this all happened. Not just what Philip did, but how he was able to do it. And the honest answer is that he counted on the same thing Beverly counted on, and the same thing Claire counted on. And if I'm being straight with myself, the same thing I would have counted on too. that the people in a family will protect each other, even when protecting each other means staying quiet. He understood our instincts better than we understood his intentions. That's a hard thing to sit with. What Beverly did, going to Stuart in December, writing that letter, leaving a paper trail when she had every reason to believe nothing would come of it, that wasn't an act of suspicion, it was an act of clarity. She looked at what was happening without flinching from it, and she made a plan anyway. She didn't let grief or loyalty or the fear of being wrong stop her from doing the thing that needed to be done. That kind of clear-eyed thinking, the ability to see a situation for what it is rather than what you wish it were, is something most of us only find when we're desperate. Beverly had it when she was scared and sick and didn't have much time left. I don't know how she managed that. I think about it more than anything else. Claire carried something for 3 months that she shouldn't have had to carry alone. She heard something at Thanksgiving that frightened her, and she made the choice that felt safest, the choice to wait, to give the benefit of the doubt, to hope she'd misunderstood. I don't blame her for that. I've made the same kind of choice myself, more times than I can count. But I think we both learned something about what it actually costs to stay silent when you're not sure. The not being sure doesn't protect you. It just delays the reckoning and makes it harder when it finally comes. As for Philip, I've thought about this too. He didn't become who he became overnight. I'm not saying I made him that way. But I'm also not pretending I don't have questions about what I missed, what I let slide, what I assumed would sort itself out. Holding someone accountable, really accountable, when they're your own child, is one of the hardest things a parent can be asked to do. I know now that avoiding it wasn't kindness. It was avoidance dressed up as patience. The $1 Beverly left him in that will wasn't cruelty. It was precision. It said everything that needed to be said, cleanly and without drama, in the only language that couldn't be argued with. She was smarter than all of us, right up until the end. I'm 63 years old. I live alone now in a house with a loose floorboard and 38 years of memories and a new estate plan that says exactly what I mean. I don't know what comes next, but I know how to read a room, and I know, finally, that knowing isn't enough. You have to be willing to act on what you know, even when it costs you something. Beverly knew that. She proved it. I'm still learning,